We're back. Yeah, that's what Sam Ellinger said years ago, which we're going to be discussing a lot of Texas Longhorns football in this podcast. Did you expect me to do it? No, probably not, seeing that as I am an Aggie. So before we get into all of that, you have to understand that if you've listened to my podcast in the past, I have come from a very non-biased perspective the whole way through. So, if you're a first-time guest and you're listening to this show, you have to take everything I say, with a grain of salt and evaluate it in your own perspective, because I have some good things to say about Texas in this podcast, and it's not going to be I'm just going to bash you because look, here's what's fun about having good relationships with good friends, right? We got this crew that they're Texas fans. They watch the games. They get upset when they lose. They get happy when they win, and, argumentative when things don't go their way, or you know how it goes. Like, we win, but it's not as we should have won at a much more higher points than that. They're fans. But I have fans on my side in the past that if my team lost the way that Texas lost on the big stage where everyone can see it, the Texas Longhorns are here today, at AT&T Stadium for the college football semifinals, and some white nerd with glasses is talking about it. But flip it to the Dallas Cowboys and my team loses. People that don't even tell me happy birthday, people that don't, which is not a lot, people that don't tell me Merry Christmas, people that don't tell me Happy New Year, people from the woodworks come out. I haven't heard from this guy in 2 years. Come out and they're like, how about them Cowboys, baby? And you're like, dog, really? Like, if I asked you to hang out, you'd say no, but you want to take time out of your day to come after me. I'm just sitting, I'm in pain, damn it. So anyway, a good relationship to have with your Texas crew or with any crew is to ask them how they feel. Is say, hey, what did you think of that game? Have an actual discussion, because what they can tell me might help me on my own damn show. You might learn a thing or two about a team you don't cheer for. It's like me I'm an expert on all things Houston Texans. No, I'm not. But later in this episode, we're going to get into some Dallas Cowboys content, because they just parted ways from Mike McCarthy. So I'm going to be talking about that because I'm kind of an expert on it. I've been cheering for the team for as long as I've been alive. I used to cry myself to sleep when Tony Romo would blow a game. I shed a thug tear when Dez Bryant dropped it. I've been there. I've done that. So, without further ado, if you're a first-time listener, thanks for joining the Shatter the Script show. I'm glad to have you guys here. A lot happened in the semifinal game that we're going to be covering between Texas and Ohio State. I just want to cover one specific topic out of that game, and we'll do more on the Stats and Scars episode. The Notre Dame Penn State game. I wanted to cover, a moment out of that game that I think was worth noting. I'm really not going to talk much NFL. I might do a little Justin Herbert, but I just feel like the wild card doesn't tell us anything we need to know quite yet. Everybody that you kind of thought was going to win won, in a sense. But the primary topics are going to be, did Quinn Ewers bring Texas back? The second one will be Arch Manning, the new sheriff in town, quote unquote. And we'll discuss the implications of Arch Manning according to Quinn Ewers and just my outside looking in perspective on all of that. And then we'll go into Mike McCarthy parting ways with the Dallas Cowboys, Jerry Jones in the hunt for a new NFL head coach, which is not a prediction on who it's going to be. But I just want to go into the ins and outs and the ifs and buts and honey and nuts of what happened and what I think the best route is to go forward, whether I think it was right with Mike McCarthy, and so on. So, 4-minute intro. Got off a little tangent there. But if you're a first-time listener, thanks for joining the show. Like I said before, you can follow us at Shatter the Script on all platforms, YouTube, Spotify, TikTok, Instagram. Just search the handle Shatter the Script. And let's get on with the show. Okay, starting off first, Quinn Ewers. Look, I know a lot of Texas fans are very, very negative towards Quinn Ewers. And I think after this year, you're watching a team that isn't supposed to be the team that they are currently. And I guess I can put it in a better sense. The team you're watching is almost like an inheritance for Arch Manning. And we just want this old and decrepit king to just retire. Or we want Biden out of office. I'm not picking sides. I'm just saying we want old, decrepit Biden out of the office to get the young, blah, blah, blah in there. Just hypothetical scenario. Get that bow-legged Quinn Ewers out of there and, get that boy with the limp out of there and just let's go with Arch Manning. Skip to the end. We want to skip. You told me Game of Thrones has 3 seasons with build-up? No, I don't want the Arch Manning build-up. I want it now. I'm skipping to season 4. That's what the kind of overall consensus of every Texas fan not every Texas fan, but Texas fans that I've talked to about Quinn Ewers. I was at the bar watching the game here in the local area, and Arch Manning came in for one snap. And what was it to do? Well, you could probably guess if you're a Texas fan. He came in to run on a 4th and short. You know who else does that? Riley Leonard. Okay, great. Quinn Ewers Arch Manning gets the first down. But what I thought was interesting is as soon as he came into the game, the whole bar is cheering. And it's like, oh my God. So I want to put some perspective on everybody that cheers when Arch Manning comes in, when it happened in the A&M game, when it happened in the semifinals, when it happened wherever else, when it happened in the regular season when Quinn Ewers got hurt, and just provide some background information on why I think it's absolutely criminally wrong to boo Quinn Ewers. All right, let's take a look at his greatest wins here. Obviously, against Oklahoma, you guys were getting routed by them until Quinn Ewers comes along. Substantial performances against Texas's arch rival Oklahoma, as I'm talking about. In 2022, returned from injury to lead Texas to a 49-0 win over the Sooners. Pretty good, right? A game that highlighted his potential and reignited fan optimism. This was Texas's largest margin of victory in the Red River Showdown since 2008. In the SEC, against SEC opponents. So he's had success versus Oklahoma this season as well. He also did a great job in the Red River Shootout. Against SEC opponents. From before they entered the conference and when he got into the conference. He had victories over SEC teams like Alabama. Pretty big one, right? That was when Saban was still there. Texas A&M at Kyle Field at the end of November. My college team, not an easy game. Went in there and did his job. He's been winning in this conference this whole year, essentially. I mean, Arch Manning filled in 2 games, and we'll get into that a little later. Beat Michigan in 2024 in as they were a top 15 team at the time, away at the Big House. Like, that's not an easy thing to do. So I think what upsets Texas fans a lot of times is the margin of victory. It's like, we should beat them by more, but Quinn Ewers. And I think when you look at Riley Leonard, people probably praise him. They say, oh, well, Riley Leonard, he's a leader. He's a guy that goes out there and just, it's gritty, but he gets the job done. And he's getting a lot of praise for it. And then he'll go out and say, I didn't play very well today, but we made the plays that we were supposed to make, and we won the ball game. Thank you to the defense. Thank you to the rest of the guys on the team. Different quarterbacks have different ways that they lead and win games. You don't got to be Bo Nix in college. You don't got to be, Jalen Hurts at Oklahoma or Baker Mayfield at Oklahoma. You don't have to be Johnny Manziel. You could be a Brock Purdy at Iowa State and then be drafted in the NFL, as Mr. Irrelevant, and then go off and make Pro Bowl teams, make a Super Bowl by just doing the things you're supposed to be doing, not playing outside of yourself. And I think that's a guy like Quinn Ewers. Now, will his draft stock be a top 3? No, I don't think so. I don't think he'll be drafted within the first 3 rounds, but will he get his shot? And is he a disciplined player? Yeah, but I think you guys should consider praising Quinn Ewers for his time in Texas. Let's go into some more. Stats and record. His overall record. Quinn Ewers has a 27-9 record as a starter, which is significant, considering the lack of consistent winnings that Texas had previously. They did okay with Sam Ehlinger. Before that, it was absolutely a shit show until right after Colt McCoy had left, and the days of Vince Young, Colt McCoy. After that, obviously Texas fans, you know about that long, almost decade or maybe over a decade, where it was just we only had 2 8+ win seasons or whatever it was. So the record is the best for a starting Texas quarterback over 2 seasons since Colt McCoy in 2008 and 9, like I mentioned earlier. So the best record since Colt McCoy, when you guys were there, if that makes sense. Like now you guys are back. Passing stats. Over his career at Texas, Ewers threw for over 9,000 yards and 68 touchdowns, maintaining a streak of 27 consecutive games with a passing touchdown, the longest active streak in the FBS at the end of his career. That's pretty good. I mean, there are not many other quarterbacks that are doing what that is doing in the toughest conference, which you guys joined this year alone. He's played 1 year in the SEC. He had held that record and continued that to maintain that record. The year before, got into the semifinals against Washington, put up numbers. So I think hold your horses still here. Improvement. His passing efficiency saw marked improvement year over year with better completion percentages and fewer turnovers compared to his initial seasons, indicating growth and adaptation to the college game. And of course, I'm reading that statistic off from a certain source, and I'm like, this is what you want to see as a college quarterback. This is what NFL scouts want to see. And I'm not saying he's some crazy, amazing NFL prospect. What I'm saying is every year he got better. And every year marked new challenges. Arch Manning coming into the fold. Injury versus Alabama. Then get into the semifinals and have to play, you're playing Washington with Michael Penix. Close game, you lose. Next game, well, guess what? You still have Arch Manning on your back, and you get to join the SEC conference and play every single one of your rival teams, including another 2 added on there, and as well as Georgia, and you have to win that conference, go to an SEC championship game, then go to an expanded playoffs and beat more teams to get to the dance, which is, I guess that Final Four or the national championship, obviously. And he got all the way until he played Ohio State, who was the hottest team in college football. And where did he have him? At the 2-yard line on 1st and goal, got you all the way down the field just for your offensive play caller to call a really bad toss pitch out play to the left. Third down play doesn't work. And then on 4th down, I want you Texas fans that are screaming and yelling because everyone was probably drunk watching this game, and watch the right tackle. And this is a pure example of team matters. That it's a team sport. That there's no such thing as an individual effort in the execution of a play. Now, down the field, you can do your Justin Jefferson, juke 3 or 4 people, blah, 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 but you still got people blocking down the field for you. And there are incredible individual efforts such as that. I'm not saying that. As the play is progressing, it takes a team. And when your right tackle falls face forward and pancakes himself, and Jack Sawyer just comes flying in there free-handedly on 4th down, and your quarterback's trying to hold the ball and try to find a throw to make, because most likely everybody was covered, I'm not putting that one on Quinn Ewers at all. And not that he thought that thing was going to be taken back for a fucking 85-yard touchdown. All right, yeah, and I talked about injury resilience, man. I mean, he's battled a lot of injuries. I think he had an oblique strain a couple years ago, this year, excuse me. Come back against Oklahoma after missing that game and won it, 49-0 or whatever it was. He had basically the new ankle bracelet on his ankle. He battled through the Texas A&M game with a hurt ankle, so his mobility was basically negatively affected throughout the playoffs. I know for a fact that he probably wasn't himself. Hence, they didn't get a first-round bye from losing the conference championship game versus Georgia. So, again, battling through injuries, you're probably not seeing the full product. Which is why all you drunken fans sometimes are just screaming things just to make yourself feel right. And you're like, you got to understand the reality of what's going on. So, again, I'm pitching for Quinn Ewers here. First playoff appearance, Ewers was instrumental in guiding Texas to its first college football playoff appearance in 2023, ending a long drought for the program. Texas reached the playoffs again in 2024, making him the only quarterback in recent history to lead Texas to back-to-back playoff appearances. And not only that, back-to-back playoff appearances, not meaning the top 4 team playoff, but also in the 12-team playoff, get to the semis. Conference title, he led Texas to win their first Big 12 championship since 2009. Would you argue that Texas is back after winning a Big 12 championship, not winning one in over a decade? Would you argue? I mean, are you sensing it here? Okay. Further solidifying his impact on the team's resurgence, and then got into a conference championship game in the SEC, a brand new conference, the mitochondria of college football, one might argue, and lose it by just barely. Am I starting to cook? And I know a lot of Texas fans just don't like Quinn Ewers, and they'll just say, well, if you look. And that, I guess that's what I'll get into. But look, let's compare him with previous quarterbacks. Since Colt McCoy, Texas has struggled with quarterback consistency and success. Ewers, unlike predecessors Shane Buechele, Sam Ehlinger, and Casey Thompson, has not only matched but surpassed the expectations set by past quarterbacks in terms of team success and personal performance metrics. And, Ehlinger was a great leader. One might argue, I would sense that some Texas fans probably compare Ewers' talent to Ehlinger. I would disagree. I think Ewers has a better arm. I think Ewers makes better decisions. I think Ewers is a better leader. And it has shown up in scenarios to where you need him the most. He has actually done the job and gotten you in position to win. And so, all this being said, all those statistics being brought into the fold, I don't see the argument against saying Quinn Ewers did not bring Texas back. He absolutely did. There were so many statistics and numbers and records and all this kind of stuff within Quinn Ewers' time at Texas to suggest that Texas is back. That Texas does make conference championships, that Texas does make playoff appearances, that Texas is in the national championship conversation every year. Hell, next year, Arch Manning's led Texas offense is the favorite to win the national championship. Your roster is stacked. That doesn't come from sucking. That comes from people wanting to play under a coach like Sarkisian with a quarterback like Quinn Ewers. They don't transfer from Alabama to Texas to play with a scrub. They knew Quinn Ewers was starting this year. Why in the hell would they go, yeah, I want to go play with Quinn Ewers, who's a scrub? That makes a ton of sense. Like, whole college football atmosphere doesn't like him. They got Arch Manning on his heels. I want to go play with Quinn Ewers over there. Or I want to suffer. No, it doesn't make any sense. They go to play with the stud. They go to play with the guy that can get him to the dance, to get him more views, to get him more under the television lights. And Quinn Ewers has successfully done that since he's been at Texas. And he's done it with a smile on his face. He has been very welcoming of Arch Manning, even though the media has taken this guy as college football's Jesus Christ. I mean, he has only started 2 games this season, correct? UL Monroe, Mississippi State. I think he filled in for an injured Quinn Ewers at the latter half of a different game, right? And we'll get into that in a second. But the pressure that comes with having the media's favorite toy as your backup to win every time that you make a mistake, every time you make that fumble, you throw that interception, you do this, you're not moving the football against the number 1 SEC team in your conference. Arch Manning subbed in on this 4th down. The crowd is roaring, wanting you to fail, wanting you to be benched, wanting you to warm the bench over there and sit by the heaters and do whatever you got to do. Anything to keep you off that field because of a name. Because of a name. And I love Arch Manning. And I have praised his method of progressing as a quarterback. He'd be going into his junior year, without starting, learning the system, which I think is great. I think that's phenomenal. He'll probably come out next year red hot. Good, great. I hope he does. But it was incredibly unfair for every Texas Longhorn fan that cheered against Quinn Ewers when he was in, or when he came out for Arch Manning. When Arch Manning subbed in, you guys were like, yeah, screw you, Quinn Ewers. Yeah, I'll do another Miller. Fuck. No, that's incredibly unfair because he brought you guys back. And you could argue Sarkisian was a big part of that, but to have somebody that got you in places that you have never reached since 2008 and 9, since the damn stock market crash, since Obama was elected president in his first year, since those two things happened, nothing has happened for your program since, until Quinn Ewers arrived in Texas. So with that being said, Texas is back. It's because of Quinn Ewers and Steve Sarkisian. And when Arch Manning enters the fold next year, you're entering as a favorite to win the national championship. When has that ever happened in the last 10 years? It hasn't. Thank Quinn Ewers. If you see him, shake his hand, get a picture, kiss him on the damn cheek, wash his feet. Because he was the savior in Texas. And I'm going to stand by that. Now, moving into the Arch Manning atmosphere of this thing. Arch Manning, they're calling him the new sheriff in town. As if like Rick Grimes just walked in to the University of Texas in Austin, It's like, oh my God, Arch Manning, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay. After enough times, the guy is completely shoved into your face. And you're just like, can we just see this guy play already? And, Arch Manning, I praise him. The quarterback epidemic in the NFL is real. And you see it in young quarterbacks like Anthony Richardson. You see it in young quarterbacks like Caleb Williams, which, the numbers look fine for a guy like Caleb Williams. When you watch him play, you kind of think to yourself, you scratching your head like I'm doing now, and you go, what am I doing? What is he doing? On 2nd and 6, running around 150 yards of total yards behind the line of scrimmage at midfield. Like, why? And, Anthony Richardson saying the NFL is easy and then throwing for like 37%, completion percentage. All that because, you didn't really learn the system. You didn't really incorporate, NFL knowledge when you were in college to say, how can I read a defense? How can I check? How can I make an alert? How can I read the box and run it when I got numbers? How can I tell if a DB is blitzing and make those calls? How can I get past the first read, the second read, hit the check down, those sort of things. Which is why guys like, SEC quarterbacks like Nussmeier, like Connor Weigman, like those kind of guys, when the season starts, they're like, that's the NFL prospect because they've shown somewhat of a capability to go through progressions and make these types of plays. And Arch Manning is kind of perceived to be one of those guys. He's perceived to be somebody who has done it the right way and said, well, I don't want to just play 3 years or redshirt 1 year, then play 2, and I've made the 3-year rule. Okay, I've got some pretty cool combine stats. I'm going to the NFL. Oh, and plus I'm 6'5", whatever, and I can run the ball. Like, I don't think that's the product the NFL is looking for. I think the product they're looking for is shockingly, this is a drastic example, but shockingly somebody like a Bo Nix. Yeah, he played in college football forever, and people are just going haywire on the kid for, being in college football for so long, and then when he gets here, it's like, whoa, he should be good. And it's like, well, back in the day, they're like, actually, let me step back a minute. With college football having that 3-year rule, right? You got to stay freshman, sophomore, and junior year. My argument for that is, I think it's to prevent, it's like preventative maintenance for bad product in the NFL. And they're still getting bad product. And you see a lot of times, like, we keep granting these college athletes more and more years. And with a guy like Arch Manning, in his case specifically, which, I'll get back to focusing on, is he's gone through freshman and sophomore year, has only played just a couple of games. He's only started 2 this season. And next year, assuming, I believe Quinn Ewers already declared for the draft and whatnot, like, he's going to make a decision on whether he's going to transfer, whether he's going to undeclare like Carson Beck did, head to a different school. But his time in Texas is done. And Arch Manning will be the starting quarterback in Texas next year, in his 3rd year, starting his 1st year. He learned Steve Sarkisian's system. That's not going away. So you're going to see, I think, a really fun NFL prospect. And my advice for a guy like Arch Manning is I would stay 2 years and get plenty of film. You don't want to just play 1 year, and let's say things go bad. Let's say if you get an injury and you didn't play a full season, you miss 1 or 2 games. Let's say you didn't get your best shot at winning the national championship. You come the next year, your senior year, and you play that year, and everything goes right. Or everything goes right both years. Doesn't matter. Those 2 years are just tons of film for NFL scouts to collect, to evaluate, and say, this guy did it the right way. We want to encourage colleges to do it this way. Do it the Arch Manning method. Take the advice of your elders and say, learn the system. Enter the NFL in a where you've already been prepped. You've already been baked. You're just ready to get the icing on the cake. Let us put that NFL touch on your throw, on your mechanics, on your timing, on your reads. And your talent can handle the rest. Your brain can handle the rest. And I'm excited to see that from Arch Manning as a Texas A&M fan, like I mentioned earlier. But watching him come into college football is a great product. And I think other quarterbacks should follow it. Now, what I don't prefer that college quarterbacks do is stay for 6 or 7 or sometimes 8 freaking years in college football and essentially disrupt young talent in college football. To say, I'm Alex Bowman at Oklahoma State. I've just been granted my 7th year or whatever it is. And you got a young gun sitting there ready to play. And it's like, well, we suck anyway. Why are we starting the 7th year guy? And he cracked me up because I commented on this scenario when it came out and said, ain't nobody want to see him in his 7th year. Let the young guns play. Hours later, he quotes the news that came out from like On3 Sports or whatever it was and was like, ain't nobody want to see me play. I was like, hey, that's respect. There's a man that knows a little too late, but when to hang up the cleats. And, and there's a difference between personally saying I'm going to hang up the cleats because other people think it's time. And then there's also the other side of the coin that says, I love football and I don't want to stop playing and I don't want this to be my last snap. And I understand that. I've been an athlete before. So there's nothing wrong with that. But the product the NFL wants is, in my opinion, 3 years of learning the system, showing that you can progress through reads and all the things that I mentioned prior, and being loyal to a team, being highly characterized, where your character takes you where your talent can't sustain you, where your talent's still pretty damn good. Good metrics, pro style, a little bit of mobility, kind of that improviser metric in college football. You can make the plays when you need to. You can stay in the pocket. You can make your 2nd or 3rd read a completion. And you don't just run a purely RPO offense. I think if Arch Manning can accomplish that in his 3rd year, and possibly another 4th year, I think you might have the greatest NFL prospect since Andrew Luck. And I think that project for future quarterbacks is going to be extremely relevant for college coaches, programs, NFL scouts and whatnot. And you might see it a little bit, or a lot, excuse me. You're going to see it a lot, most likely in Bill Belichick's North Carolina system. So, a lot to look forward to if you're a Texas fan. You should be, overwhelmed with happiness that your team is back, that your program is back in football, where, most of the nation characterizes football as the number one sport. So relevancy for college universities and programs usually resides in football. For other teams, it's like, okay, we got Kentucky, we got Duke and whatnot. It's like, that makes sense. You guys are great basketball teams. But when you have a prestigious baseball team, a prestigious basketball team, but not a prestigious football team, you're like, we're just missing that one piece to get back to where we used to be. Then Quinn Ewers arrives, and you're back to being a premier brand. You're in a very, very highly premiered and respected conference. You get to a title game. You get to the playoffs twice. And you're back. So, be happy. Be happy. Okay, that's enough about the Texas Longhorns. Hopefully we get A&M gets their revenge next year against Arch Manning with our future Jaden Daniels quarterback comp, Marcel Reed. I'm joking. So I guess back to what I'm an expert at, and that's Dallas Cowboys football, which I haven't really spoken about in a while because they've been irrelevant this year, despite really having the opportunity to go 9-8 in a disastrous season. A lot of injuries for this Dallas team this year, including their starting quarterback, Dak Prescott, which if you haven't been paying attention, you're a college football fan, you're listening to this. Dak Prescott going down with that season-ending surgery-required hamstring injury. Cooper Rush coming in to fill in the gap there. Micah Parsons going down with a foot injury at the beginning of the season. Them not doing anything in the offseason to improve their roster and kind of maintaining the salary cap in the best way that they know how, which is one of the worst ways. Not going after prestigious veteran running backs that have proven to be phenomenally effective this year, such as Derrick Henry, such as Josh Jacobs, such as Aaron Jones, such as, and you just keep going down the list. You're like, Saquon. Did they have the money to afford these guys? Was there interest? For one particular running back, yeah. It was Derrick Henry, who's had the best season for the Ravens. Him and Lamar have been probably the best duo in the NFL this year. And I understand why they didn't go for a running back. I get that. I don't value running backs as important. I think that if you get a guy like Rico Dowdle did just fine. And I think where the Cowboys made their mistake is that they should have addressed this position in the draft. But now, if you want to be encouraged, you're going into the draft with possibly the best running back class that I've seen in a long time. And you can go through all the names. We'll get into that come draft time. But if you haven't heard the news already, Mike McCarthy and the Cowboys have parted ways due to, contract disputes. They couldn't really negotiate a contract at this moment in time. So technically, Mike McCarthy is a free agent in the coaching atmosphere, which is a different kind of free agent. So a deal is possibly on the table in the future for him to come back to Dallas. Just at this moment in time, they weren't able to figure out a negotiation. So he's free to talk with other teams. They rejected the Chicago Bears requested to interview Mike McCarthy for their head coaching vacancy. And the Cowboys denied it just to part ways with him 2 or 3 days later, which, that's just not how you handle things, in my opinion. Plain and simple. I think that's a really stupid way to handle it. Because if you were going to part ways with him in the first place, it seemed like they wanted to get a contract together, but as some analysts have mentioned, McCarthy probably had a target year. He probably wanted 4 or 5 years in his contract. Jerry probably wanted 2 to 3. which isn't really much of a shot, considering that they've got some pieces that they got to add to the team that were not Mike McCarthy's fault for not obtaining. And so Mike McCarthy is revered by your starting quarterback, Dak Prescott, who has had his best seasons under Mike McCarthy's belt. Essentially, Mike McCarthy, when he came in, elevated Dak Prescott's performances. You saw a phenomenal year in 2021 statistics-wise, where he was in the MVP conversation for the first 10, 11 weeks until he tweaked his calf muscle. And it just kind of regressed from there, but he still had, 35-plus touchdowns, less than 10 picks, like phenomenal year from Dak Prescott in the MVP conversation, right? 2022, you win 12 games. Dak Prescott, once again, like he had the quote-unquote interception problem, but it was like he threw like one a game, but then outside of that one interception, you saw a damn good Dak Prescott that could push the ball down the field, that could light up the scoreboard. And then you fast forward to 2023, you see an even better Dak Prescott, his best year statistically, to where he should have won or got a lot more first-place votes for regular season MVP. However, it was robbed from Lamar Jackson, which is a different argument. But, winning 12 games in a season, winning your division, and doing all those sorts, or not winning your division, but being 12-5 and playing the way that you did, having the stats, beating the teams, beating the Lions and whatnot, like it was 100% worthy to look at MVP for Dak Prescott, which is a crazy thing to say now because people look at recency bias and say, well, Dak Prescott's not that good. This year, they entered the season with almost no weapons outside of CeeDee Lamb and an injured Jake Ferguson and a running back room that they didn't know what to do with it until Dak Prescott was injured, and a defense that was completely plummeted with injuries, where they lost Sam Williams, your basically second or third year edge out of Ole Miss. You lost Micah Parsons to a foot injury. You lost DeMarcus Lawrence to a foot injury. You lost Nealon. I don't want to get his first name wrong. Nealon to another injury. You lost DeMarvion Overshown later in the season to another ACL injury to his other knee. Trayvon Diggs is hurt. Deron Bland didn't return until like week 10 or 11. Kalen Carson, who had a very good first 2 or 3 weeks, disappeared. It just was a really bad year. Leighton Vander Esch forced into retirement. And the defense got shredded, and they pinned it against Dak Prescott for not putting enough points on the board. And I argue with that. People don't understand how football really works. When you get 28 points put on you in the first half and you say, well, he's not putting up enough points. It's like, well, I mean, yeah, the first quarter didn't go so well, but after the first quarter and it's 21-0, your script kind of goes out the window because the clock's ticking. So does that relate to Mike McCarthy? And I think even with injuries riddled to your team, I don't think there is an excuse to say, oh, because you're injured, that just means you can get ran through by every team. I don't think that's acceptable, because you look at a product like the Green Bay Packers, Mike McCarthy's old team, and you say, well, that team has dealt with injuries all year to their quarterback, to their receivers, to their defense, all the way down the ladder. And they finished 11-6 and made it to the playoffs. Now, by the time they got to the playoffs, it was like, okay, this season just needs to end. And they played the Eagles this past weekend with no Christian Watson, no Jaden Reed, no Romeo Doubs, and just they couldn't move the football. There's nobody to throw to. Sounds familiar. And so let's go into reasons to keep Mike McCarthy. With all that being said, kind of paint you a picture about where the Dallas Cowboys are now and where the Cowboys have been and their quarterback's performances, who you just paid $60 million. Do you retain or let loose Mike McCarthy? Here are some reasons to keep Mike McCarthy based on just general knowledge, okay? So he's obviously got consistent regular season performance, which back-to-back-to-back, 3-time 12-win seasons making the playoffs is an accomplishment. That's something to be revered in the NFL. That's not an easy thing to do, to be that consistently above 10 wins. So 3 consecutive 12-win seasons from 2021 to 2023. And then, which is something that even in the 1990s, it was difficult to do when they were a dynasty, right? And then the high regular season winning percentage, with a record of 49-35, which, that is from 2020 to 2024. That's considering the COVID year where Dak split his ankle in half and you finished 7-10, and this current season when Dak injured his hamstring, and they were a blocked punt and a game-winning touchdown from the Commanders from being 9-8, which is interesting, to say the least. So, Mike McCarthy holds the highest regular season winning percentage in Cowboys history among coaches with more than 2 seasons. This record indicates his capability to win games consistently, right? And those 2 reasons right there, I think, are your biggest arguments to saying, along with our third reason, Dak Prescott's great performances as a quarterback for the franchise under Mike McCarthy, having a system in place from Mike McCarthy that you understand. You don't want your quarterback going through 3 or 4 systems. It's really difficult to gain traction when you're just like, oh, here comes a new system. We got to learn this whole damn thing inside and out again. You got the cadence right. You got all this sort of things. And so those 3 reasons: consistent regular season performances, high regular season winning percentage, and a great relationship with your starting quarterback who you're paying $60 million a year. Back-to-back-to-back 12-win seasons, 49-35. Dak Prescott in the MVP conversation 2 out of those 4 years. So, with that being said, we'll go into reasons to part ways with Mike McCarthy. And this is, I think, there's more evidence here to suggest to part ways. Poor playoff performance is a big one, right? He's 1-3 in the playoffs. He's lost twice to the San Francisco 49ers, lost a big one at home to the Green Bay Packers, and the only team that he beat, ironically, is Tom Brady in his final year versus the Tampa Bay Bucks, where the team just played outstanding. I mean, Dak Prescott had his best playoff performance that we've ever seen. So that's one reason. And you look at the lack of innovation and adaptation in between games is another one. Like the game management issues, the scheme, is that what's really popping for the head coaching? Penalties and discipline, like those 3 things all intertwined together have been, in my opinion, the biggest problem for the Dallas Cowboys over the past 4 seasons. Because you look at it, his game planning and play calling criticized over time, right? The inability to get started early, to get out in front of the hump and say, all right, we got the lead. Now let's play our brand of football because we're up 7-0. We're up 10-0, and go into the half with a lead and not down 20 or not down 10 and say, all right, Dak, go play hero ball. That's not an easy ask for somebody who technically isn't someone who can play hero ball consistently. There's only like 3 or 4 quarterbacks in the NFL who can play hero ball like that. And so then you go into game management. And this is my biggest criticism of Mike McCarthy. There have been multiple instances where, McCarthy's clock management, game decision-making on 4th downs, overall game strategy, they've all been questioned, right? And to where it's like, okay, why did you call a timeout there? Why are we punting here? Why are we doing that? We got 3 timeouts. Why aren't we calling one here? And it's costed Dallas a lot of scenarios where they didn't even need to be in that scenario. And I think I have mentioned this before with analytics and how it has played a part. I kind of was basing my argument off of Dallas because they use analytics in some weird way where it's like, okay, we're going to go for it on 4th and goal here, knowing that we're up by 7 or knowing that we're down by 3 or whatever it would be, and come up with the most atrocious play call possible on that 4th down. Specifically the one where they snap the ball two receivers to the right plus a tight end, and they do a sprint out short side of the field, and there's just nothing there. And so Dak is forced to make a play. Interception happens. They blame Dak when the play call literally did nothing for you there. It just didn't make any sense. And then you go to the press conference, and you're like, that's the play call we like on that down, and that's what we're going to do, and that's our brand of football. And it's like, well, that doesn't get the job done, and it hasn't in the past. And when you play these good teams, you play the 49ers, you can't beat them. You play the Packers, you can't beat them. You play the Lions, you beat them, but there were some game management issues at the end that scared the living shit out of people. You play the Eagles, well, when Dak's in there, he plays hero ball, and it's like, it's a really close matchup, rivalry game, I get it. But those good teams, you haven't been able to beat in the past as a head coach, and that's a problem. Because if you're America's team and you're going to win the big dance, guess what? Unless you get the first seed, you got to beat 3-4 of the best teams in the NFL, which you repeatedly has shown as a head coach and, as the team that you have, can't do. You can't do it efficiently. You could beat the average teams. You can beat the slightly above average teams that sneak into the playoffs. Outside of that, it's kind of a downfall. But, another big issue that I mentioned, penalties and discipline is, Cowboys under Mike McCarthy have frequently been among the most penalized teams in the NFL. And that's also a problem. It's things like jumping off sides on third down. It's false starts. It's holding penalties left and right. It's, not lining up onsides on offense. It's getting defensive holding penalties on the defensive line where you're like, what? I've never even seen that called. It's special teams penalties from Sam Williams where you're like, why are you doing that? And that comes with discipline. So lack of discipline and penalties cost you points. It costs you drives. It costs you field goals. You can't just lean on Brandon Aubrey to kick you 70-yard field goals. It's embarrassing to lean on that. Because then you're like, well, this offense is getting bailed out by a kicker who needs to be your last resort. So all of those problems coming into play, right? Like the reasons for keeping them, the reasons for parting ways. I argue that the Cowboys need to part ways with Mike McCarthy. And I understand the success that he's had, and it's really hard to find better because you don't know. You're going into an unknown is what I'm trying to say. You can find better, obviously, but will you? And the amount of coaching prospects that are out there currently today, I think the market's good. I think it's the right time to kind of get into that. I'm thankful I mentioned it on X. I'm thankful that Belichick and Vrabel are not in the discussions. Now, there's a $10 million buyout you can do with Belichick, and that's going to buzz the headlines for some time for Belichick to join the Dallas Cowboys. I think that's a really wrong move. I think that is going to be a massive mistake by hiring Bill Belichick. The teams that are winning in today's football, outside of Andy Reid, are younger-minded coaches that have innovated the game in their own way and have a special way of calling an offense, calling a defense, and winning football games. You see it with Sean McVay. You see it with Matt LaFleur. You see it with Ben Johnson as the OC, which Ben Johnson is calling the plays over there. Dan Campbell is a player's coach. People want to play for him because of his motivational skills, because of his kahunas that go for it on fourth down, right? Well, who's calling those plays? So Ben Johnson is absolutely in the discussions right there. And I think without Ben Johnson, you might see a different Dan Campbell. You argue who's more valuable there. Well, in terms of success, it probably is Dan Campbell. But can Ben Johnson be a head coach? Absolutely. You go into Nick Sirianni. He's a younger coach. Sean McDermott and Joe Brady. Just kind of these guys that it's like, or I would argue Joe Brady, not Sean McDermott. Zach Taylor. All these different guys, there's a winning formula that needs to be obtained from the Dallas Cowboys to where he walks into that building and says, get out of the way, Jerry. This is my team. I'm going to decide what the X's and O's are. I'm going to just decide personnel, the ones I want, the players I want in the draft, the players I want in free agency, and I'm going to win that way. If you would just be the owner, smile for the camera, I will do everything you need me to do in this building, if you just let me. And that has been missing from the Dallas Cowboys for decades. Because ever since Jerry Jones fired Jimmy Johnson, it has been, I'm going to go get myself a yes man. Yes, sir, Mr. Jones. Whatever you want. Yeah, you can sit in the coaches meeting. Yeah, you can put an input on whether we sign back Zeke or not. Yeah, you can come in here and say blah, blah, blah. No, get out. And I know it sounds cliche, but it's not. It's really that simple. Get a guy in there that coaches football, that is not all about selling tickets, that incorporates that within its offense. And I think you have some good pieces around the Dallas Cowboys roster that can win you a Super Bowl. The effort that Micah Parsons showed in the latter half of the season, got up to 12 sacks despite his injury. That dude was playing his ass off. And I found a new respect for Parsons. Rico Dowdle wasn't supposed to be as good as he was. Reached 1,000 yards after getting the starting job after the Pittsburgh, 2 weeks after the Pittsburgh game. Middle of the season. Was like, okay, now you can have the starting job. And just little pieces like this where it's like, okay, we got to get back to understanding what earn the star means. Where it's not like, oh, you're drafted here, welcome to being a Dallas Cowboy, here's your star. Like, no, there's an agenda in place that the coach put forth. He incorporates discipline. He coaches a winning scheme, a winning formula, and a winning mentality that doesn't incorporate ticket sales. It doesn't incorporate the brand. It incorporates, hey, get out. I'm coaching football here. Let's roll. Now, what candidates would arise from the ashes and be good for the Dallas Cowboys? I don't know. There's really only two. One off the top of my head, but like that would say like, okay, if you got this guy and you got out of the way, I would be a believer in the Dallas Cowboys again. And Ben Johnson is the top of my list. Now, I mentioned this. With Dallas Cowboys, it's just not possible. And I know this team because what you're going to find out, again, is that in this coaching hunt, which the Dallas Cowboys is people say it's a very attractive job, right? Oh, you want to be the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. That's a big-time brand. I think it scares a lot of head coaches away where it's like, yeah, I'd love to go coach, but not in Dallas because I have to be essentially whispered in the ear by Jerry Jones constantly, telling me how to run my offense, telling me how to run my team. I would argue it's an unattractive job. And those that do it are basically daring themselves to get into a game that is beyond chess, that is an impossible way to win, which is why I argue that Dak should leave. It's like it's not that I don't think he can win. I really do believe that he is good enough to get you to the dance. And when you put him in the right system with the right pieces, right? And it's just not possible to do in Dallas until something changes. So, when you look at the candidates, right? You look at, different guys like, and I'm going to pull them up here, different guys like Belichick, like I mentioned, these guys have been suggested in previous years. Belichick was in the conversation. Vrabel was in the conversation. Years ago, it was Sean Payton was in the conversation, who's doing well now with the rookie quarterback Bo Nix in his second year and made the playoffs and, not going to beat Josh Allen. It's just not going to happen. John Gruden was another name mentioned in previous years. Now, suggested currently, you have guys like I mentioned, Ben Johnson, Todd Monken, the offensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens, who's done a phenomenal job this year. And, the two ones that sound more like something Dallas would do is Kellen Moore. Cowboys really like to hire from within their own party. So Kellen Moore obviously had ties as the offensive coordinator with Dallas. That's just a total move that they would do with Kellen Moore. So he's been in the Chargers. He's been with the Eagles. He's in the playoffs now with the Eagles. It would make sense in Jerry's eyes to make that decision. Like, nobody would be shocked. The other one is Deion Sanders. And you're like, Oh, good Lord. Like, if the Cowboys get Deion Sanders, I'm probably out. It's a PR stunt more than anything. And then you move on to guys like Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator for the Bills, Bobby Slowick, the Houston Texans offensive coordinator, Brian Flores, the Minnesota Vikings defensive coordinator, Cliff Kingsbury, the offensive coordinator at the Washington Commanders, who was previously the head coach in the Cardinals. Like, these couple of these offensive-minded guys, couple of these defensive-minded guys. But there's also been rumors of Jason Witten, which kill me. I love you, Jason Witten, but no, like, you're not going to take a high school coach at a private school, respect the private schools, been there, and just immediately implement him into an NFL offense or NFL head coaching job. That doesn't make any sense. And I think the angle they're going at there is to have this Dan Campbell approach where it's like, yeah, we're going to get this guy that knows how to get leadership within the organization. Sure. But I'm telling you right now, the next head coach of the Dallas Cowboys is going to come out of right field. It's going to just be some blatantly random head coach that you would never expect to show up in that building, that was almost never mentioned previously until you get the report like the Cowboys are interviewing this guy. Like a couple of years ago when Mike McCarthy was getting interviewed, Marvin Lewis showed up. And you're like, what? And so I understand there's the Rooney rule, which is stupid, by the way, and it's offensive. There's going to be reports come out and people are going to get buzz, and the Cowboys are going to get their normal media buzz that they always get. And I think the line being drawn for the Cowboys is going to be they're going to sign their head coach at the 11th hour. It's going to be somebody you never heard of. Nobody. I'm not going to guess it. I'm not even going to try and guess it. The Cowboys' Twitter is going to speculate, and they're going to act like they're going to write tweets like idiots, expecting us to believe them. And many of you will be deceived by these accounts. But the truth of the matter is, you won't know who it is until it happens. And you'll never guess who it's going to be. Bless me. And that's sad, because I've got no hope. I've got zero. But yeah, anyway. Okay. I just want to talk two different things right here. And this has to relate, we're going to transition to the college football semifinals and just do a little recap discussion of my two takeaways, right? And they're not the whole game. They're just two things that happen within each game. And two takeaways from the brands that, like Texas and the brands like Notre Dame. So, in the Texas game, late in the game, you saw tight end Gunnar Helm catch a pass in the fourth quarter and get that first down, stiff arm a guy on the sideline and point at him, and he's flagged for unsportsmanlike conduct, and it disrupts the whole outcome of the play as Texas is marching down the field. And this is just another example of how college officiating has been so awful over the past 2 years, and probably more than that. You know, I compared this to the example of seeing, like, in the Army-Navy game, you had one of the players get flagged for excessive celebration in the end zone, and you're just like, why? We're here to watch Army and Navy, our servicemen, go out here and support our troops, brother. Like, they spike the ball and do whatever they want to do in the end zone, and you don't question it. That's entertainment, and you're going to flag him because it's, we're by the letter of the law, you know. And you bring in these, I tell you what's got to be the most difficult job in terms of PR is those rules analysts, you know, like Dean Blandino or whoever the guy on Fox is. I'm blanking on his name, but he's Mike Pereira. You know, guys like that. And I understand there's different ones for college football. But, oh my God, when they come in there, I think I disagree 70% of the time. Where it's like a late hit out of bounds when the quarterback becomes a runner. And you're just like, oh my God, like he became a runner and you hit him out of bounds. While he was in bounds, you walked your way to the out of bounds and continued to tackle out there. And you're like, oh yeah, that should be flagged. But if we're going by the letter of the law, you know, this is the right call. And then the Fox Sports analyst Tom Brady, Troy Aikman, whoever it is like, I just disagree. Like, I just, no, I don't agree with that at all. The roughing the passer crap, the targeting stuff, always controversial. Never know what the hell is which, and we just sit here and we're pissed. So with this, in a game like this, in a situation like that, a little point saying, gotcha. Oh yeah, that's going to get you flagged. Meanwhile, you got other dudes acting like they're doing drive-bys and gatting these motherfuckers up on the field, and that's getting flagged. And you're like, oh yeah, you shouldn't be shooting people on the field, obviously. But a little point says first down, stiff armed your ass, a little fun. It's in a critical scenario. You're like, oh yeah, that's getting flagged. Let's ruin this game right quick. Yellow flags out. Let's move it back 15 yards and make it really hard for this to be entertaining. They're never going to be anyone's fans. They're never going to have the support of the fans or the audience. Nothing. It's just this never-ending carousel of, damn, that was a shitty call. And you know what's crazy? They never get punished for it. There's nothing you can do besides write an appeal that say, oh, yeah, we got it wrong. You're right. My bad. Now what? There's no accountability for any of these officials, and they just get to make wrong decisions without being punished. It's like the law of Moses just doesn't apply to college officiating. They're living above the standards of moral superiority, which is demonizing in my opinion. And that's kind of the one takeaway I wanted to focus on primarily in the game was, obviously I talked about the bad play calling at the goal line where, Texas got down the field with Quinn Ewers and just atrociously called plays at the goal line, and it costed them the game. And, at that time they were within a score, right? And they get that score. It's a whole different ballgame. A whole different ballgame. The score does not reflect how close that game was. And then you flip it up to the drive with Gunnar Helm, and you're just like, oh my God, what are we doing? We're supposed to be entertaining ourselves watching this game. And so on the flip side of that, on the other side of the bracket, I wanted to talk about I've been talking a lot of Notre Dame lately, specifically with Marcus Freeman. I've liked what he said in the press. He got asked once again on the media's one of media's largest stages right after you win the college football semifinal on the big stage, saying, how does it feel to be the first African American, Asian American coach, whatever they said, to be going to the national championship? And it's like he answered it perfectly once again, but it's just consistent race baiting from ESPN that it just drives fans and me nuts. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. It's not about that. It's not even close. Now you can throw that statistic up there however you like. You want to play that side of the bargain? Sure. Go ahead. Knock yourself out. It just brings nothing but split opinions in every comment of the post. You're just like, I don't even want to get into that. I want to go into football and just completely escape from every single political commentary you can possibly bring up, and I just want to watch sports. But I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to say that I think Notre Dame should join a conference. I think it would bring respect and equity to the college football committee and teams. Because from my knowledge, Notre Dame plays within the ACC and every other sport, I believe, but except football. And, I was talking on Twitter about this to where I was kind of given a historical lecture where it was essentially back in the day, certain coaches from Michigan and others blackballed Notre Dame from an anti-religious and a racist standpoint. And it's been like that ever since. And it's the time he was talking about it and what I was reading was from the time of World War II, they were blackballed from joining a conference. And I was like, okay. I'm sure other teams experienced something like that before. We're fast forward almost 100 years. We should have devised a solution by now to get Notre Dame within a conference. And there's arguments that it's okay, it's going to cost Notre Dame its audience, its national audience, if they joined a conference. It's going to cost them money to join a conference. And I just don't care. I think it would completely change the outlook on Notre Dame if they joined the ACC, if they joined the Big Ten, whoever you want to throw them in. Because, obviously, geographic location doesn't matter anymore for conferences. Everybody's split up everywhere. It's literally based upon budget, essentially. Budget, brand, and, maybe some rivalry games. It's like, okay, well, what rivalry does Notre Dame have? Okay, USC. So, okay, USC. That's a good rivalry. And let's see what conference they're in because I'm blanking. Because they got a lot of headlines when they played each other at the final regular season of the game of the year. So USC joined the Big Ten. And so it's like, okay, USC going to the Big Ten, do you put Notre Dame in the Big Ten? Well, the Big Ten is basically the Big 1,000 now. So it's like, okay, well, I don't know if we can add another team in there, but maybe we can put them in the ACC with name brands like Miami, SMU, Clemson, Notre Dame. That makes a lot more sense. Add another big team in there because the other teams kind of they're really not doing a great job of keeping up in the ACC. So why not throw them in there and then say, oh, well, instead of having the one team that doesn't play in a conference championship, that has a national audience, you throw them in there and say, okay, well, Notre Dame is the ACC championship winner. Now we can categorize them in the college football playoff. Not, okay, we've got our Power 4 conference championship winners. They get the first round byes. Notre Dame doesn't ever get a first round bye because, well, simply they're not in a conference. So it hurts yourself, too, to not be in a conference. And from there, we're going to move forward with our ranking system in the college football playoff. Well, where do you rank Notre Dame, who played two plausible opponents all year? Or maybe you can call it USC a big brand, but it's like, okay, they played A&M week 1. They lost to Northern Illinois, like we've discussed, and thousands have already. And then Louisville. Then you played both Army and Navy. No, put them in branded football, make them play conference games, and let's see how they do. And I'm sure they're still going to do great. It's not about seeing that they're going to do bad. It's about putting them in the house where they belong, adopting them to a system that every other college football team plays by those rules. And then make a decision. You now have no FBS independence, and everybody can be ranked accordingly. And I kind of want to take away from a clip that I saw from Joe Klatt and kind of do a 9-1-2 model. And that is 9 conference, for every team is responsible for playing this model of scheduling every single year from here on out. That way there's complete equality and easy referenced opponents, strength of scheduling. Everybody plays by the same rules. 9 conference games, 1 non-conference game, and 2 group of 5 opponents in one schedule. Boom. It makes total sense. So that would put you get A&M schedule, right? You play your 9 conference games in the SEC, which I think they play 8. Then you play the 1 non-conference opponent. In this case, it would be Notre Dame, and then 2 group of 5 teams. And I'll just take away from other teams. You'd be like, okay, we'll do Boise State and UL Monroe. And that's your schedule. So you get your 2 weeks where you're like, okay, we're probably guaranteed to win, and it makes money for those group of 5 teams playing. It's like a pay me game. So it helps them keep up with their budget. And so there's just a lot of positives to that. And I really enjoyed listening to that model from Joe Klatt, but that was not my original idea. That was Joe Klatt. And I think I'd agree with it. And I tried to find maybe an alternative to say, okay, can I put my own spin on this? I haven't really thought of one yet. But the 9-1-2 model, it would be, I think, really enjoyable to watch for a lot of fans. Because then you can argue, well, the Big 12 plays this many conference games. Oh, well, your non-conference opponents were terrible. Ole Miss was 5-0 before they played anybody. It's like, oh, you got me there. So instead, everyone plays by the same rules. So I think that would be great for college football. And that's from a I want to give Notre Dame the flowers they deserve standpoint. That's not from a I want to see them fail. Not at all. I want to see them succeed in a light where I can go, okay, I respect that. I can't give a ton of respect to Notre Dame knowing they're not in the conference and they played nobody this year and they get into playoffs and they play Indiana, which, okay, and then you play backup to Carson Beck, Georgia, and then you play Penn State. Like, they proved themselves, which is Georgia and Penn State. I'm not calling them a bad team, but you're going to be doubted every single year by not playing an FBS conference schedule. So remove that argument from your own brand and get into a respected conference, and all those problems go away. So, okay. I think that wraps up our episode for today. I appreciate you guys joining in. Per usual, right around an hour. We'll be covering more of the NFL playoffs. Of course, the national championship is this week. We will be discussing that in the Stats and Scars episode in depth, so stay tuned for that. Obviously, the matchup is Ohio State and Notre Dame. So big-time offense versus big-time defense. That'll be interesting to see. But if this was your first time listening, or if you've been here before, be sure to share with your friends. We got reels and shorts and TikTok videos out there that you guys are able to share on stories and like and comment and do whatever you want. We really love the engagement and would really hope that you did so. Please and thank you. And then you can subscribe to our channel or follow us on any of our podcast channels, which supports video and audio, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and Spotify. And then our social media content on Instagram, TikTok, and X, all under the hood of @Shatter the Script. Okay, thank y'all very much. I'll see y'all next week for another edition, and we'll be recapping the national championship by then. So, thank you, everybody, and have a good day. Oh, Shatter!